It was just this last week. It was about 3 days ago, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm laying in bed, fast asleep. I'm dreaming, who knows what. And all of a sudden, my wife, she wakes me up. And I'm one of those ones when I wake up, I'm all startled, like, what's going on? What's happening? I wake up, my daughter and my son are up. This is 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Something happening. Like, did somebody break in? Is like, what's the deal? I'm kind of like in panic mode as I'm kind of in this fog. And everybody goes, no, calm down. There's just this beautifully eclipsed moon outside. And my son and my daughter went out on the street at 4 o'clock in the morning. They had planned this to go out and watch it. And they were like, Dad, you got to come see this. Dad, this is amazing. It's so important. We're going to wake you up. Like, we don't want you to miss it because we know, Dad, you love things like this. So I get out of bed. I come down. Here we are, 4 o'clock in the morning, standing in the middle of our road in the front of our house. And we're just taking in. We're just gazing at the beauty of this amazing eclipsed moon. And it was just like the stillness of everything else, the stars that were shining, the clear sky. And we couldn't help but just standing there gazing at it. This is what's happening in the story. But this is something I think a lot of us aren't good at. I think this is something we've missed. We've missed this idea of what does gazing worship look like. Having the posture where we look every single day for what God's brilliance is on display in our lives. We wake up and we come out of our lives and come out of our shells and we're saying, God, I want to see your greatness all around me. And when you put it on display, your faithfulness, your breakthroughs, whatever it is, God, I want to have eyes wide open. I don't want to miss it. Do you see the posture of that? It's not just a physical posture on the outside. It's this gazing posture of our hearts, living in anticipation, expectation, not being so preoccupied with the busyness of our lives that when God does show up, we miss it. There's so many things that God is displaying in your life right now, but I think for many of us, we just aren't gazing at it. We're not slowing down to take it in. We're not even reflecting on it. We're just moving from the next hectic thing to the next hectic thing. Let me just read this text to you. Here's the story of Moses. Exodus 33:9. It says this, as Moses went into the tent. Now, this was a tent that he had set up that if people wanted to talk with God and meet with God, that's where it happened. So Moses goes in the tent to have this encounter presence with God. It says, as he went there, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance. You catch that? Moses goes in the tent. God puts on this display of his brilliance through a cloud. It emerges and it hovers over the opening of the tent. And then it goes on to say this, that's where the Lord spoke to Moses. And wherever the people saw that pillar of that cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they all stood. What did they do? They worshiped. They all stood and they worshiped. This is the thing that Moses said in this moment. Moses is having this encounter with God. God's presence is on display. And it says that everybody came out of their tents. They stood in front of their tent and they began to worship. They were in this gaze and amazement of the brilliance, the beauty, the awesomeness of God. When was the last time that you had that kind of worship? Where you just slowed down enough to pause and say, God, I'm just blown away by who you are. God, my heart is just filled with the goodness that you've bestowed on me, the things that you've come through, the prayers that you have answered, not just focusing on the ones that you haven't. God, I just sometimes want to be so just engulfed and I want to be so overwhelmed and captivated. God, I just want to have a worship of gaze. You know, it was interesting in this context, Moses looked at God and said, God, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to take a step forward unless it's led by your presence. He said, God, I want to have your presence leading us. Because, and then he goes on to say this, it's what distinguishes us from everybody else. There's a lot of people following something. Maybe you're following something. Moses said, I'm going to follow your presence. I'm going to follow your presence. Listen, many of us will never know how to follow God's presence because we don't even know how to recognize it. We don't know how to get overwhelmed by the gaze of his faithfulness. You want to know, how do I follow God's presence? Start with a place of gratitude. Start with a place of taking time to reflect on who he is, what he's done through you. And as you do that, you begin to go, there you are. There you are. I see it. And as we see his faithfulness, we see his presence, as we have that gazing worship in our heart out of gratitude, out of thankfulness, we begin to recognize his presence and we begin to follow him more. It distinguishes us from everybody else who's following something.